begin recording. All right. So, hello, everybody. Thank you all for coming. And as you saw from sharing the screen earlier, you are now in Unconference 5, titled Crowdsourcing Lessons Learned from Registered Reports. My name is Kalum, and I am one of the session leaders for today. I'm joined by Lara, Kelton, and Anurada, who are my fellow session leaders. Lara, Kelton, and Anurada, would you like to identify yourself? Just introduce yourselves briefly.
Sure. My name is Lara Aknin, and I am from SFU. My pronouns are she, her, and I have, well, Caleb, should I mention now
Yeah,
my
please.
relevance to this?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and we in my lab we have tried. I've been involved in now kind of three different registered reports, and so um, I feel like I've learned a little bit as I've in those experiences that I was thought could be helpful, but I know there are folks who have a range of experience, and I'm hoping to learn from them too.
Kelton, would you like to
Yeah,
just,
sure.
yeah,
Hello, everyone. My name's Kelton Travis. I'm also at SFU with Lara and Calum. My pronouns are he, him, his, and yeah, I'm just happy to join and take part of this. I've been grateful to have the opportunity to work on one of these registered reports with Lara, so I'm very excited to have some conversation about them.
finally, Anurada?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Anurada. My pronouns are she or they, and I used to be one of Lara's students, and now I'm at Toronto Metropolitan. And yeah, I'm really excited to be here and just to hear from everyone's experience.
Yeah, and thank you all very much. As I mentioned earlier, I'm Calum. I am an incoming graduate student at Simon Fraser University in Burnaby, British Columbia. We're going to be under the supervision of Dr. Lara Aknin as well. Before we begin, what I hope is going to be a supportive and constructive conversation about registered reports, I just wanted to lay down some ground rules to make sure that the session today runs smoothly. So first and foremost, as you may have noticed, the session is being recorded and will continue to be so. And if you're going to find the recording, you can do so in the Zoom lobby as soon as the session ends under the Watch Recordings tab. That was something that was laid out in the lobby chat there. We encourage everybody here to unmute yourselves at any time, turn on your cameras, and speak up whenever you'd like. But please do feel to do whatever you feel most comfortable doing. And finally, it's okay and completely encouraged to leave if you have to at any point in time. If you do have to leave, as I mentioned earlier, you can always find the session recording. Honorata will be taking some notes, which we will be posting as well. And we also have contact information on our Unconference landing page, where you can always shoot us an email as well. What we'd like to do now is turn our attention to the wonderful people in attendance today and get to know you a little bit more. If you're comfortable, we'd ask you to share your name, if you'd like your pronoun, your institution, your broad area in which you're coming from, and perhaps the reason why you're in attendance today. Um, if you'd like, I'll just choose Lisa. Would you like to begin if you're comfortable?
Yes, of course. Hi, everyone. My name is Lisa. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm working at the Leibniz Institute for Psychology, the ZPIT, which is an open science institute in Germany. And I'm actually doing meta research on pre-registration, and also I'm currently working on our pre-registration platform. And so I have a general interest in pre-registration and registered reports. And I also have some experience with them, which I found very, very helpful. So my first project in my PhD, I published as a registered report, and currently I'm working on the revisions of a stage 2 registered report at PCI, and I really love them, so I'm happy for the session.
No, thank you so much. Helena, I'm sorry in advance if I mispronounce your names as well. But please.
That's fine. I answer to all versions of my name. It's I'm Helena Patterson. I'm from the School of Psychology and Neuroscience at the University of Glasgow. I'm a senior lecturer. My interest in being here is that we teach students about registered reports and pre-registration. I have some experience of the students doing this for undergraduate and postgraduate assessment, and just what the issues are. So I'm always interested in finding out more so that I can take it back to the classroom to, make it easier for students to learn how to incorporate these ideas, even if they can't do it properly, fully, in their work.
Thank you very much. Maureen,
Yes, hi. Thank you for organizing this session. I'm Marine Mas. I'm a postdoc researcher at UC Louvain in Belgium. My main area of work is emotion psychology, and I'm mostly interested in this session because I would like to publish in registered report, but I've never done it. I have some colleagues that I know that have done it and have had super amazing experiences about that. I'm also involved in a network of researchers on alexithymia, and the question of publishing more registered report has come within the executive board, so this is also a way for me to get more information and maybe try to find ways to create incentives in my group to develop this.
wonderful. Thank you. And thank you, Lauren and Addie in the chat for introducing yourselves. Richard, Fadakimi, Uba, if you're at all comfortable at any time, you can always chime in and introduce yourselves as well.
Okay, thank you. I'm Farike Miaju. I work in a hospital as a clinical psychologist, and I'm passionate about mental health. And the reason for joining is, learning is everyday thing. So I'm open to learning. I'm open to networking with others so that I can improve my service and ensure that my patients get better. So, and I hope that, joining this session this morning is going to add something better to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see that we have a handful of new faces in the call as well. So just as hello, Uba, if you'd like to introduce yourselves, please.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'm from Nigeria. I hope I can say it. Good morning. My name is Dennis Suba. I'm a clinical psychologist. I have a PhD in mental health and adult mental health trouble, including substance abuse. I'm a member of the American Psychological Association. I'm happy to be here because in Nigeria, we have a peculiar case in the sense that we don't tend to publish registered reports. We don't tend to publish, we don't look at that. Here, it's a matter of publish or die, you know what I mean? But now, as we are transforming into publish and innovate, I want to take this back to my board, which I'm a member of several boards here in Nigeria, and I would like to enlighten them more about this. So by so doing, I want to learn from here to take back to the
I think we might be having some connection problems. Is that on my end?
I think so.
Okay.
It's also frozen for me.
Okay. Apologies, Dennis, but we'll continue on and hopefully you're able to reconnect back. All right. All right. So if for the new faces that joined us a little bit later, we're just in the process of introducing ourselves. If you'd like to, and if you're comfortable, you can chime in with your name, pronouns, institution, and the reason why you're joining us today as well. This is Unconference 5, crowdsourcing lessons from registered reports. So if not, we can continue to the brass tacks of why you're here, and that being registered reports, um, to kind of spark a conversation and to kickstart things. We'd like to offer a definition of what a registered report is, because we might be coming to this conference with different levels of experience. Quite just in plain language, a registered report is a research article publication format, which has been increasing in popularity relatively recently, wherein research questions and study protocol, including hypotheses, methods, and proposed analyses, are pre-registered and peer-reviewed prior to being conducted according to those pre-registered and peer-reviewed plans. One thing that we will begin with as well is a quick poll. Some of you had answered this when you had introduced yourselves, but we wanted to ask a little bit more directly what your experiences with registered reports are. You'll find that there are going to be three different options: new, some experience, and experienced. And I'll give you all a little bit of time to finish that. And while this poll is circulating as well, um, yeah, we can go forward and hit on our main discussion points that you'll have seen in our landing page. The first kind of topic of discussion that we wanted to bring was, what is your biggest challenge or biggest barrier that you had regarding registered reports? And if you have yet to do so, what do you anticipate being your biggest barrier or biggest challenge when it comes to registered reports? If nobody wants to immediately weigh in, Lara, Anurada, and Kelton, this may be an opportunity for you to respond as well.
I am happy to
Yeah.
chime in if no one
Yeah.
else is immediately. And thank you to those who are introducing themselves in the chat as well. Thank you. It's lovely to have you here. I think there are a number of barriers to doing your first registered report, and even once you've done a couple. I think one that has been crossing our minds lately in my lab is just the time delay. So while I think you get an incredible amount of feedback, I have noticed that it has taken longer than other forms of research that we do, and I think it's well worth it, I should say. But sometimes it has created some challenges for funding. So I've had to ask for grant extensions to be able to take into account the time that is required on the front end for this feedback, because although I had written a 5-year grant. Sometimes it has taken longer than that by the time we get to the stage we're ready for a registered report. And also, Kalum, as you are well aware, sometimes it doesn't always fit into the timeline of a graduate student thesis, or doesn't follow the typical timeline. We've had to start thinking about front loading supervisory input and feedback, as opposed to doing it a little later in the stage. So some of I guess the broad umbrella of ideas is that sometimes registered reports take a lot more time than I was anticipating, and have had to lead to restructuring of how we spend our time and our resources.
Thank you very much. And just to share the results of our poll, thank you all for responding, it looks like 50% of us reported that we are new and just learning about registered reports. 29% of the lobby has some experience, and 21% is experienced conducting several. So thank you. It's great to see a diverse background here, and we hope to satisfy everybody in why they're here today. Kelton and Anurada, did you have anything else to build off of in terms of challenges or barriers when it came to carrying out registered reports?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we kind of came across in one of those register reports that Lara was speaking of was also unexpected time delay in say recruitment of participants and things like that, that although as you pre-register your methods and everything along those lines, sometimes down the road you don't realize how long that it might take for those to happen. And I do believe that we received a couple extensions in how long that was going to take and with the reviewers.
Thank you. And Anurada, did you have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, I don't have too much to add right now, but
Yeah.
I'm very curious to hear what other people are thinking and if um yeah, anything what we've shared from our experience has been, a hesitation or a reason uh that's prevented you from kind of diving into the world of registered reports.
There's a really interesting comment from Bjorn that your registered reports are taking longer than they did years ago. So that's an interesting reflection that maybe they're a victim of their own success, where there are so many receiving feedback that there is a delay in the system. Sorry, Lisa, I just saw your hand. Please.
Great. I also agree with the time delay. And I'm not sure if you're already asking about possible solutions, but for me, what made this easier within my PhD, making it possible for me to do a registered report, was that it was at the very beginning. So right off the start, when I got into that position, my very first project was a registered report. And I really liked that because I was very inexperienced. And so I got all of that feedback at a very nice point in time. And also it took some time to get the reviews and everything. But within that time, I could already plan my second and third project. And so it was not a problem. So I can really recommend just starting off with that. And recently, with another registered report, I was a bit unsure about how much deviation is okay. And I think this is a huge topic of discussion in general, also with pre-registration. And I think personally just report it transparently and justify. But sometimes it's, I think, a bit difficult to see what is okay. And of course, you can just check in with the editor, but if you have already done all of that work, like you have the IPA and you are conducting the study, and then you notice, oh, there's a huge thing that has to be changed. I think that can, or for me, it created some kind of insecurity of will this be okay, or is it too much? Will the IPA be taken away from me again, maybe? And I think that is an issue that should be addressed more, maybe.
That's really helpful. Thank you. Yeah, I was going to raise that as a second idea. I think that's really helpful. So you do all this work, you submit your plans that have been peer reviewed and approved, you submit it. And then I have had the experience on one registered report that the data were messier than expected, or we had to pivot with our analytic plan, or sometimes even with our recruitment plan, or later we realized that one of our intended plans was not going to pan out as expected. And so we had to make a pivot. Like you, Lisa, I think we learned in some of our recent reports that the editors have been extremely helpful. So sometimes pinging them and asking, hey, we've realized that this is a major point of decision. And seeking feedback, the editors have been extremely helpful in approving these minor additions or changes. But when we've had to make major departures, or for instance, try an entirely new analytic strategy, I fully agree, and I'd be curious to hear if other people with some experience doing registered reports, which it seems like there's a wealth of on this call, have had a different approach. But I feel like transparency has always been our guiding light. So where we've had to make adjustments or changes, we've explained what we've done, we've justified it, and tried to make it extremely clear. I'll stop talking to let other folks chime in, but it's really fascinating to first and foremost just see the representation on this call from so many places. I've been jotting it down, but also to see that so many folks have some experience.
So yeah, it's an open floor to anybody if they'd like to chime in, weigh in with perhaps any barriers that they anticipate or they have faced when they've been doing registered reports. So far, we've hit on time, hit on possibilities in terms of deviations. But yeah, we'd be happy to hear anything big or small that you may have. All right. So if we don't yet, and which is perfectly fine, and we can always touch on that later, we can move to the next topic, which are successes and possible solutions to the challenges that we may face regarding registered reports. So I'd like to ask everybody now what their biggest success was when running a registered report. What was what was a particularly fulfilling part of running a registered report? What went well? What would you keep the same in your future registered reports? I think I can begin here. Um, One thing that we've learned from our prior reports in the lab is incorporating some amount of flexibility into our stage one plans, our initial plans. For example, our university, SFU, is undergoing a slow and somewhat confusing change in transitioning away from Qualtrics as our data collection platform of choice. And accordingly, in the current manuscript of a registered report that we are writing up, we are simply alluding to a data collection more broadly speaking and not explicitly stating that we will be using Qualtrics or any other platform in particular because there's a lot of ambiguity in the air of what we're going to be using once data collection actually begins. And instead of kind of being stuck to plans and stuck to these rigid details of Qualtrics, perhaps leaving that ambiguity open, that flexibility will make things easier down the road. If anybody has anything else to share in terms of successes, in terms of fulfilling parts of registered reports, please, the floor is open to you.
I have a question if I can build on off that, Caleb, for the folks who have done this or for the folks who are thinking of running registered reports. I think having a certain amount of flexibility to execute is helpful. I'm curious if other folks have done that or for instance, when we mentioned that there will be a manipulation check in our designs, we offer a sample question, but we don't necessarily include all of them. We found that's helpful just later if we need to make add some precision, if we need to think about how exactly it will come across in student understanding. I'm wondering if other people have found that helpful or if they have, if their strategy is to provide the exact materials. We have been finding in our lab that there's a variation across different journals. Some will require the exact manipulation and the exact dependent variables, but others will, the exact dependent variables for sure, but we'll offer sometimes sample wording. Sometimes we've been using scripts for in-person exchanges. I'm just kind of curious if other people have, have used sample items or something like that.
Yeah, please, Lisa.
I think that's a very interesting question because I personally think that the more detail you give in the pre-registration, the more, because I'm focusing on pre-registration too, right? But that also goes for registered reports. The more precision you give or the more details you give, the more effective the pre-registration or the registered report is because it reduces researcher degrees of freedom. And so my personal understanding would be to be very precise and then just report any deviations, give a justification. And I think for this, it is very important to change how we communicate about deviations, or I think in general, we need to communicate more clearly that deviations are normal, that, for example, you might need to change something to because you have a valid reason for that, because it improves the study. And then make it clear so that the editors, the reviewers, and also the readers understand that this is just like normal and you don't have to stick to the plan 100%, which puts pressure of people, right? So I personally think it is better to give as much as possible. And I really like the idea to, for example, to just create the analysis scripts and everything based on simulated data. And then later you can just run that on the actual data. But that would be very, very precise. You would have to report very small changes too, right? So
Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, that's I agree that the more precision is generally very, very helpful. We have found ourselves sometimes in these conflicting places where maybe it was an insecurity with one of our early registered reports where we didn't, because the context of a registered report is the plan is you should execute the study exactly as explained here, and as it says in many journals, if you deviate too much from this plan, that would be grounds for rejection. And so sometimes it feels like even minor deviations should be checked, but we didn't want to get to a place where we were checking with the reviewer on every minor adjustment for a manipulation check question. And so we certainly haven't made adjustments to the dependent variable in our analytic strategy, and if we did, that would be obviously a major change in a report. But the ambiguity we have built in is to try to allow some of the flexibility for, here's the concept we're after for a manipulation check. This wording might be exactly how it's used, but it might, it could change slightly. But I think this is one of those interesting tensions about how exactly, what is exactly best practice that is still being tweaked, aside from the major elements, the intervention, the dependent variable, the analytic strategy, sample size, all of that. We have been wrestling with how much precision to put on those, what seem like slightly more peripheral features. Of course, any deviations always reported. Thank you. Anybody else have thoughts on that?
I was just gonna say, I wonder if there's a way that I don't know if anybody here has been a reviewer. I don't know if Bjorn had mentioned that on registered reports and so forth. But I wonder if there's a way to kind of include some anticipatory deviations that you kind of may anticipate over the course, because knowing that these things can span years sometimes, and so it might be, if there's a way that we could include those, I think that would be maybe a helpful solution to that.
I know with some of the registers reports we've done, we've tried to think particularly in an analytic strategy, like if this occurs, here's what we'll do. If this, like if these items hang together well, here's how we'll proceed considering these data. If they don't, here's our plan. But I do find that sometimes the best of intentions, we can't anticipate all the ways in which things might work. And so that's when the best made plans are still in flux. But yeah, a decision tree. Yes, sorry, Lisa, just saw your suggestion there.
Yeah. So if we don't have anything else to touch upon when it comes to successes, perhaps Anurada, this might be a great time to talk about perhaps your timeline and sharing that. Yeah, I think you should have the ability to share your screen, and the floor is open to you for that.
Yeah, actually, Kalum, if you don't mind just putting it up, I'm happy to speak to it a little bit.
Okay, let me share my screen then. And what we're referring to here is going to be, are you able to see it?
Yep, I can see it.
All right.
Can you just zoom in a little bit?
Of course. Is that better?
Yeah, that's great. So I just created a little diagram, hopefully to help visualize how long it's taken us to do one of our registered reports in the lab. And In red, I've put some of the, outside events that were happening. So COVID, I moved institutions, and we had a few labor strikes and disputes in our university, which affected recruitment. And then you can see it's taken over 5 years for this particular project. So before 2020, Lara designed and drafted a grant and received the grant. And then we did a couple pilot studies. We had our stage 1 approved in 2023, and we just submitted our stage 2 last month. And of course, it'll take a bit more time for reviews. Yeah, we just thought it'd be helpful to kind of show how long it can take, but also how, like Lara mentioned, how meaningful and valuable this work is to do. So we want to encourage people to think through how to do this. And for example, in our case, we added some students who could help. So Kelton helped and joined the project a little later on. That was one strategy for um, for getting this project done. So yeah, that's what we wanted to share here.
Yeah, and this image is available on our landing page as well, if you would like to refer back to it at any time.
I invite those. I'd be happy to share. Sorry, Calum, I didn't get this out before we pivoted to the timeline. But I will say that in all of my, I think, 3 or 4 experiences with registered reports to date, I have found that they are an extremely rewarding experience, but also extremely constructive and friendly experience. I believe I've said to my students that I see this as some of the best science can be. I feel like the opportunity to receive friendly and helpful and constructive feedback before testing your ideas and making the most of your resources and kind of harnessing the collective wisdom has been such a rewarding experience. The first registered report I took part in was submitted to JPSP, and I was extremely nervous. I think we were one of the first published as a registered replication report there, and we received such helpful, constructive, friendly feedback. We needed to pivot midway. We realized that our study 1 worked as we expected, but study 2 led to some surprises. And so we contacted the editor and said, this wasn't in our original plan, but we'd like to make sense of study 2. Would anybody, would it be possible to include a 3rd study? Here's what we propose. We received extremely helpful feedback on design, and I think the paper was much stronger for it. And so I really, I'm impressed. I'm in awe with the procedure. I think it leads to better work. I think it leads to deeper thinking, and I think it leads to more robust insight into the phenomenon. But I think it is also helpful to know, eyes wide open, that it can take a little bit of a longer time, and there are big decisions to be made along the way. So I don't know if that resonates with others. Yeah, Maureen.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yep.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your experience. I had 2 questions. The first question is maybe the larger one. So regarding the timeline, if you knew before submitting your grant application that this would have been the timing, would you have changed something in the, I don't know, maybe submitting the first RR sooner, or maybe changing different steps?
That's a great question. I think each of the registered reports has taken longer than I think I would have built in more flexibility to my grant. I mean, obviously, a grant, nobody's going to audit your grant to exactly make sure that you followed the exact procedures you followed there, because you learn through the review process of a registered report and your design is improved. And so I think it was totally fine that the methods had changed. But now I am trying to build in early pilot data collection to make sure that the measures and the ideas, kind of like a
I believe Lara cut out there. Lara, are you able to hear us?
work to say, I'm trying to practice, I'm trying to employ best practice methods here. That's going to take longer. So I don't know if I'm able to, I'm trying to explain that in my grant. I think people are open and excited about it, but I still can't ask for more than 5 years. And so the line that I've been walking is explaining that I'd like to do this early exploratory work and then follow up with a registered report. And usually the grant officers are quite willing to accommodate the extra 1 or 2 year extension to know that it's going towards this planned high quality research. Does
Okay,
that make sense?
yeah, it froze at some point in what you
Oh,
were saying, so we missed like 5 seconds, I guess, but the overall was
sorry.
my understanding is that there is something with funding that with the funding agencies that needs to be taken care of, and in my country, so in Belgium, they have added recently an open science tab in the funding application in which we are invited to describe what we do. So maybe this is something that can be put there also to say, I'm going to submit that and maybe it will take longer than planned. So I will just present my my grant with some more flexibility due to this aspect. But I think it's very inspiring to see your experience.
You heard me, and that's awesome. And I love that you've got an open science tab, but to explain it there. And yeah, sorry for cutting out. Yeah, I was just saying that our funding officers have been very open-minded about the extensions requested to be able to execute high quality work. Many of them are just hearing about registered reports. I think psychology is leading the way in some of these, at least for the social sciences in Canada. So they've been open-minded and excited to support it, but it is kind of beyond the confines of what is the traditional path. And so it's not baked into the system yet, like it sounds like it is for you.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Bjorn, for highlighting your own timeline. If you'd like to expand on it, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I don't need to discuss it much. I'm in a sort of semi-private
Yeah.
setting. That's why I'm not talking that much.
Okay.
But I just want to echo what at least Lara said earlier about really positive experiences of being in an RR. It really feels like the way science is supposed to be done, right? And in particular, having the benefit of getting feedbacks when you can actually use it rather than in the review process after the study's already been done. So everybody wants to tell you their good ideas for how the study should have been done when you can't do anything about it. And also it is a good experience playing ball with reviewers back and forth in both roles, both as an author but also as a reviewer. It's really nice to be able to suggest things that might improve a study. But there's also a balance, of course, of how much the reviewers should meddle. I mean, we have to keep in mind that it is the author's product in the end, so they should be free to take our suggestions into consideration, but to reject them if they don't agree or think it doesn't really improve the study. And yeah, I mean, maybe that also has some impact on the timeline, because sometimes we do ask for or being asked to do radical changes, and every big change takes some additional months of the timeline. So it's not sometimes we had to show some constraints previous.
Bjorn, thank you so much for sharing that. I note that took 6 years, which is interesting that it aligns very similar to the timeline Anurada showed for ours. Mind you, ours is not published yet, so it's under the second stage review. But also I see it's fascinating that it started at SIPS. That's really cool. But also you mentioned that one reviewer raised a post hoc issue with study design. Would you mind sharing on that? I'd love to hear more.
Yeah, I mean, this is it's no secret what project it's. It's the cognitive dissonance replication that by David Vaides. So I had a minor role in it, but yeah, that was a fun thing. because we had a long back and forth about the methods before collecting data, and we made radical changes. And then after the results indicated a non-replication, then one of the original reviewers came back to us now asking for additional, or saying that of course this didn't work because you have this fatal flaw in your design. And I was quite upset, and I suggested responding in a quite different way from what the lead authors did. But they had probably a good idea to take a more diplomatic role and say that, yeah, we understand, but we don't think this made a huge impact. Because of course, the whole idea of a registered report is that all these concerns should be raised in the beginning, and stating after seeing the results that it's neither here nor there. It's not part of the process to introduce new concerns at that point.
So you handled it by kind of sticking with calmly acknowledging, but also saying the design was approved as was, that there might be alternative explanations, but
yeah, no, I think they took an even more careful route than that. I would have said something closer to this criticism doesn't belong at this point, but they actually, yeah, they tried to like meet them halfway, saying that it's not a likely explanation, and we did some additional analysis indicating that this hasn't impacted. So yeah, they were more conciliatory than I would have been, probably for the better.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Lisa, you popped in your timelines here. You have been extremely efficient. Do you feel like you have any tricks on how to remain so focused? Yeah, I would love to hear more.
So the first registered report was, I think, my main project in my PhD. So I just also spent a lot of time on that. And for the second registered report, as I mentioned, I published it at PCI registered report, or I submitted it to PCI registered reports, and I used their scheduled review process, which was really cool. So if you not know it, like if not everyone knows about it, it's basically before you, for example, before you even start writing down the first, like the stage 1 registered report, you can submit kind of a proposal to PCI so that the editor can already search for reviewers. And during that time, for example, during 6 weeks or something, you can decide a date in the future where you want to actually submit the stage 1 registered report. They search for the reviewers, and then the review process is really fast. I think two weeks or something like that. And it took some more time because I had some review rounds, but the first round of reviews was extremely fast, and I think that is a really nice way of facilitating that process.
That is fantastic. I like to think of myself as a very organized person. That sounds like a really lovely setup where you can kind of express your interest in advance so the other person can help prepare.
I guess, Lisa, is it the snapshot approach? Is it? Yeah.
Does anybody have anything else that they'd like to share? We've gone through all of our scheduled kind of topics in the session plan, but if anybody had any other burning questions or something that we haven't yet addressed, this would be a great time to bring it up if you so wish. Yeah, please.
Yeah, I just had one last question, but it's for everybody. So, what do you do? Like, how is authorship handled? Because when I see the timing, I assume that for one of my projects, maybe some people would hop in at some point, or maybe contribute, for instance, to interpret the results based on some expertise that we don't have, and that maybe needs to be brought in for interpreting some of the results. So I was curious to see how it is handled within this kind of process.
Oh, great question. Everybody's free to answer, especially, I guess, pertinent. This question is pertinent to those who have had experience with registered reports. Lara, would you like to begin with the topic of authorship?
You know what? I lost connection for a second again there, so I didn't hear the full question. Could
Okay.
you repeat it? Could you
Yeah.
give me the highlight? I'm so sorry.
It was about how authorship is handled, because maybe when you submit the registered reports, some people will hop in afterwards, or maybe, I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know if I have the fully formed or end all be all answer here. So in many of the registered reports I've worked on, the author team has remained the same, but not the one that Anurada and Kelton and I have worked on. We have just had a very, I'd like to hear your input as well, you two. We tried to have a conversation on the early side when we realized we needed more help or we needed to bring on expertise. We tried to have a pretty transparent conversation early on about who was, I mean, yes, first and foremost, what Lisa said is totally it's fine to add authors. I think my experience is that it's totally acceptable. In terms of authorship order, it's kind of like the conversations you have with other people when you're writing papers. We try to discuss people's relative contribution. We try to make sure that usually the person who generated the project idea and kind of spearheads the writing is the first author. And we try to just negotiate those conversations in a pretty fair, open, and compassionate manner. But we don't have any kind of, I don't have any formula or recipe beyond that. But usually we try to do that early, and we try to make sure we often have conversations to make sure that the first author is usually leading the theoretical work and the writing. The second author is usually the one who's doing the next heaviest amount of work. And then I'm usually happy to be anywhere in the author order. I'm not picky about that. But I'm curious if other people have conversations. Like I'm later in my career, certainly relative to the other folks in my lab, so I'm not picky. But other folks, if you have suggestions or more fully formed thoughts on this, please, I'd love to hear.
Yeah, I just want to jump in. So we should also make sure to keep all authors on the paper if they have contributed at an earlier stage, right? Even if they are, a lot of time they had to leave the group, but if they did contribute in the beginning, we should make sure they still on the final paper, right?
That is a great point.
Yeah, it's reassuring to see also that people can hop in at any time of the process. So from what I see from Lisa's comments, it's once they are in stage 2, added at stage 2, it's okay. And then afterwards on the paper, maybe it's like adding authors to a regular submitted paper, I guess.
I think so. I mean, in our experience, we've just added names for the submission of stage 2, and usually at that point, it's hopefully not far from the end of the end stage. So usually in my experience, there hasn't been much fluctuation at that point. But I assume if there is, you could contact the editor. Monica.
Hi, everyone. I've been listening from the lobby and decided to pop in. What about the possibility of, instead of assigning authorship or whatever, depending on how much work was done, presumably, keeping track of who's doing what as they're doing it? So I'm part of a team. We've developed this theory, model, whatever we want to call it, the heliocentric model of open science documentation. And a basic premise of that is that you document the labor that's being done as you do it. That way there is no guessing. If this person made the photocopies for the consent form, we say this person made photocopies for the consent form. If this person edited and proofread the consent form, this is the person who did it. This person double checked. That way there is no guessing. And it's work, but then we have all of the information. It's there. There are no questions. And I found that it's more work at the beginning to get into the practice of doing it. But then once you're doing it, it actually saves a lot of time later because you have records of everything. So I don't know.
Monica,
Yeah.
that's super cool. I've never heard of that kind of accounting, that detail. Can I ask, is is it the first person to volunteer to take on certain work? Are there expectations about who might, like, when it comes time to write the stage 2 report, is it the first one to volunteer, or are there expectations about who might take the lead on that and then log it?
I don't think, at least in our work, we just keep track of the work pretty much. And I think in our projects, we've gone with alphabetical order, or if it was someone whose idea it was, then they'll be first author. But in general, I think that our model is trying to move away from the whole authorship paradigm. I know we're kind of stuck in it for now, but at the same time, well, I'm going to be harsh here. This model will persist as long as we allow it to persist. And we need to stop giving away that power. We know that it doesn't work. We know that it's not an accurate accounting of the labor involved. We know that there are so many disparities and so much unfairness in it. So let's try to stop using it. And instead, here are the records of who did the work. And it's not like a separate set of records. It's the records of the science that was done. So I mean, I don't know, but I mean, we don't have to go that extreme. We're still in the experimental stage of doing this, but I don't know. It just occurred to me that maybe just keeping track of who's doing the work as they're doing it might be a better way to assess who gets the most responsibility for the project, depending on who put in the most work. You know, just an idea.
Thank you. And thanks for sharing it. Monica, I don't know if you saw at the same time Bjorn popped into the chat that it sounds like a more detailed version of stating the contributor roles with credit. Are you familiar with that website?
Oh
Is it
yeah, I know
similar or
credit,
different?
and yeah, I think that credit is an excellent step in the right direction, but it doesn't go far enough. So, I mean, I did a hackathon yesterday and I went over credit and the categories are too broad. They're not specific enough. So I think one of the categories is project administration. There is so much involved in project administration. So much. But the other thing is that my sense in a lot of open science structures is that we've structured things from the perspective of let's plan to do this because it makes sense, instead of let's pay attention to what we're actually doing and see what the labor looks like, and then plan a structure based on our data, on what we actually see people doing. And it really changes things a lot. I think a credit is a perfect example of that. So this seems like a good category. This seems like a good category. Let's just adopt that. But if you look at it from a labor perspective, so I'm a big proponent of science is labor. Let's treat it as such. Then the picture changes, and then we actually start to see natural categories. So who's managing that? Right now I'm stuck on human subjects approval, but human subjects approval, it's a whole thing, and it takes so much time and so much work. But yet it's not an acknowledged category of human research. There are skills that are involved. You need to know the rules, the regulations, the formatting. Make sure that you understand the best ways to get this information to your participants so that they understand. There are language considerations. It's a whole skill set. And yet it's just, yeah, we did here's the consent form, and we don't think about it without really considering how much labor goes into that, how much knowledge. And credit doesn't, as I said, I love that they've done it. They're definitely directing attention. It's something that's so important. But I really think that we did it backwards. We need to look at the labor first and then develop the categories depending on on what that labor looks like. Okay, I'll shut up already. I'm sorry.
That is really helpful. Thank you.
Mm.
I, I- I'm mindful of the fact we have about 5 minutes left. So if people have additional questions, I did notice that Addie, I believe, helpfully popped a comment into the chat about advice to someone starting with their first registered report. I think it sounds like we've got um, a wealth of experience and knowledge in the room, and I think that seems like a fantastic place to end. I don't know how you feel about that, Caleb, Kelton, Anurada, and everybody else here.
Yeah, we can end off with that. I just general tips on for somebody starting their first registered report.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you can do in your own time is just like educating yourself a little bit. And there's a lot of resources I've seen. If you actually look at our landing page, or if we can make those resources available, there's a number of different articles explaining like whether it's tips about writing a registered report or just different feedback from people who have written them before. There's quite a few papers out there that have kind of mentioned that. So that's kind of a good starting point, I think.
Yes, and as just building on what Kelton mentioned, we have a handful of relevant readings that, if you're interested further in the topic of registered reports, which you can find on our landing page as well. Yeah, does anybody else have any other um, advice for a first-time registered report?
Would you list your landing page in the chat, or did I miss it? Or oh
I
yeah,
think
someone else just asked for the same thing. Oh, thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you.
I think we just said the same thing.
Yeah.
But when in doubt, I suspect Kelton has the better link. So if you're picking between.
Oh, a little housekeeping thing in case you did notice, because I did no, I noticed late yesterday, is that we can download the transcript of the entire session so we can go back. Okay.
Fantastic.
Okay.
Yeah. I forgot to do it with mine, but so I'm telling everyone do it because then you have a record, especially if you're writing things up afterwards or ideas don't get lost. And of course, we can also download the chat. So that's what I'm doing right now.
Wonderful. Thank you. I know Anurada has been taking some notes, and if folks want to add to the landing page, by all means, we've envisioned this as a communal resource for people to share their thoughts. I know I've learned a lot. I Lisa, I did not know about the PCI registered reports you had shared, and I had heard only of credit systems before in a very broad sense. So thank you for sharing that link, Bjorn, and thanks for sharing the alternative suggestions, Monica. I hadn't heard that position in advocacy before, but that is fascinating, and we could certainly try it out. I would love to see. Are you doing research on how that impacts the outcome of research and the process of research as labor?
Oh goodness. There are things in development that I am not allowed to say out loud. How is that? But we can
Got it.
stay
I
in
will.
touch. How's that? Okay.
Okay.
That addressed everything you just asked.
Okay. Thank
So
you
I don't
kindly
want
for
to
the
jinx
work.
anything. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay.
Can I like quickly post a link to Helio, the model, so that you have a better idea of what it looks like before everyone goes? Hold on just 1 second. Then I created an infographic that explains really briefly what this whole thing is about. And I didn't think that I would okay, sorry, my computer is being silly about passwords. Because of course it will. And now it's being done. Okay. I will just put the name there because that's the quickest and I don't want you guys to wait. Heliocentric model of open science documentation. Okay, if you just do a search, it will come up. Okay, as a
Thank you.
Sonoda thing that you can download. And it's really ugly right now because people ask me to annotate, so I just dumped all the annotations. So imagine it without the annotations and it looks much prettier. Trust me. Okay, anyway, thank you.
Thank
All right.
you.
Okay. It looks like our time here is almost up. So on behalf of all of the session leaders, thank you all so much for joining today. This was awesome, and it was really, really interesting. I learned quite a bit. So thank you all, and I hope you have a great rest of the conference.
Thank you.
All right. Bye all.